As I'm sure you all know, there is a United Nations, and that should make you think, a United Nations climate conference going on in Egypt, I think, at the moment. Now, in response to this, we are witnessing wall-to-wall mass hysteria. All day long, this is on the radio, and the prophets of doom are they're going to town on this, really going to town on this, and these people are saying, quite simply, this is effectively the end of the world if we don't fix this and fix this really fast. If we don't drastically change our way of living, then our planet is finished. That's what they're saying. And it's obvious from members of the general public who are phoning in radio stations and all of that. It's obvious that a lot of the general public believe this. Now, I'm not a scientist, so you could say I'm not qualified to talk about the science. Although, having said that, I've been reading about this on and off now for 50 years. And I probably know a great deal more than many of the so-called experts. Having said that, I'm not an expert. And ultimately, I'm not qualified to speak about the science itself. What I am qualified to speak about is the politics involved in this whole climate thing. Now, this all started in the 60s, and as a young person in the 60s, I was against the Vietnam War. I was in favour of the American Civil Rights Movement, and I was concerned about climate change, as everyone was. And I kept up to date and kept myself reasonably well informed for years and years and years, all through the 60s and 70s. But there was this constant thing that would be repeated over and over again, and that was climate change deniers. Every time you'd read about this in a newspaper or a magazine, there would always be a condemnation of climate change deniers. So after years and years and years of watching this and listening to this and reading this, I became curious as to exactly what these climate change deniers believed in. So I started checking out who these people were, where they worked, what universities they were attached to, and exactly what they were saying. And of course, much to my surprise, I discovered that none of these people had ever denied climate change. What they were concerned about was the quality of the research in relation to climate change. And they argued, rightly, that in science generally, the standard for research and proof is very, very high. Very high. It has to be. Science has to be a very exact, precise science based on fact and well-researched fact. What these people were concerned with was that a lot of the research backing up the climate change argument, a lot of this research was sloppy, and some of it downright really, really bad. That was the concern. They never claimed, they never said that climate change wasn't happening. They never said that it wasn't being caused by human beings. They never said that. And so the media and the climate change movement, they were simply lying. In the exact same way that people today will call everyone racist, knowing full well they're not. It was the equivalent of today being called a racist or a homophobe or Islamophobic just to shut you up. These people back then, they were called climate change deniers, and they weren't. And so the media, and this would include the serious media, the scientific media, they were simply lying. Barefaced lying. So that made me think. Now, 50 years later or thereabouts, the situation is even worse. The hysteria is off the wall. It's really scary. It's like an epidemic of paranoia and fear. Anyhow, it seems that over the next year or two, we are going to see drastic economic and political changes, all in the name of saving the planet. Now, the politics of this is pretty rotten. All you have to do, if you think of the climate change argument, well, I can't think of the word. But anyhow, if you think of the climate change argument, the disaster we're facing, who's telling us this? Well, it's the media, number one. And the media are lying about everything. Literally everything. And that's not an exaggeration. All day long, virtually everything you hear on the radio now is a lie. Virtually everything. So this is a totally corrupt media that are telling us this. Our political class have turned essentially fascist. I keep repeating that when I'm talking about our political parties and all that now. But I'm very serious about it. This is a new kind of fascism. And these people are fascists. Fascists, communists, Stalinists. It's all the one thing. So the people who are peddling this idea of climate change and imminent disaster, these people are liars. They are pathological liars. Many of them downright fascists. So that should make you think, even if you know nothing about the science, climate change. But the science itself, and I'm not a scientist and I wouldn't claim to be an expert, but I've kept myself informed over 50 years and probably know a lot more than the average person in the street. And a lot of the science behind this is very, very dodgy, and there's a lot of money. This is like the anti-racist movement or the LGBT movement. There are people making millions, if not billions, out of this. There are masses of people employed in this business. And of course, like the anti-racism thing, it's very convenient politically if you're a modern day fascist and you want to shut people up and control them. Well, climate change, we're all going to die, so we have to take extraordinary measures and we have to take them now. And if you don't go along with it, you're a racist, you're a homophobe, and you're a denier of science. And of course, if you were to go to the academic institutes where all of this climate science is done, or to university departments, if you were to ask any of these people, if you were to walk up to any of these scientists in any of these research institutions and universities, if you were to walk up to those people and say, Mr. Scientist, can you tell me what a woman is? They wouldn't answer you. In fact, they would call you a far-right bigot for asking the question. So this is, this is the greatest con racket ever. And the people perpetrating this con are the most corrupt, fascistic, thuggish animals that I've ever seen in my lifetime, certainly. So, as a general rule of thumb, when you're dealing with people like that, you just assume, rightfully, that you can't believe a word out of their mouths. Now, as I say, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to talk about that area. But one of the arguments that's used a lot when it comes to this climate change thing, if you like, there's a fail-safe argument that these people use. And they will say, okay, maybe you're not sure about the science, or you read something on some conspiracy website and, that's got you confused and you're not sure who to believe. Okay, that's fine. And maybe you don't understand this. That's fine. And maybe this, that, and the other. That's fine. But they'll say, but if you don't understand any of that, if you don't believe any of that, there's one thing: consensus. They will tell you there is a consensus that most experts, most scientists in the world agree that this climate change is man-made, that it has to be tackled now, or we're all going to, the planet's going to die. That's the fail-safe argument they have now. Okay, maybe you're not convinced by this, maybe you're not convinced by that, maybe you're confused by something else, but the one thing that you can understand is all the experts agree on this. All the scientists. And we live in a world where you get up in the morning, you plug your electric kettle in and it works. You switch on your radio and it works. All a product of science. You get into your car, drive down the road, the traffic lights work. This scientific, technological world, massively complicated, and it all works, and it works pretty much flawlessly all of the time. And the argument is, well, the people behind this, the experts, the scientists, when it comes to climate change, they all agree on this. There is a consensus. Now, so let me tackle this. There is no consensus. And when people tell you there is a consensus, they are lying. They're not making a mistake. They're not a little bit confused. They are lying. The simple fact is that, if you were sitting with me here right now, in this room with me, and I had a double-barreled shotgun aimed at your head, we would reach a consensus very fast. But of course that wouldn't be a real consensus. When you speak of a consensus, the assumption is that it is a voluntary, free consensus, that people of their own free will, after a reasonable discussion, have all come to broadly the same conclusion. That's what consensus means. Now, the reality is, if you are, let's say, a young person, you've studied very hard in college, gone to a good college, then you're going into a good university, and you're hoping to get a position maybe in research or something at a basic level first. Something like that, and you want to get into climate change or one of the sciences, because climate change, it's really just lots and lots of different areas of science. But if you want to get into that, if you've worked really hard at school and college, and you're paying a fortune in fees in a university, and this is what you see as your future. Well, when it comes to climate change, you have to be very careful what you say. Because if you raise even the slightest question about the quality of the research, that's the end of your future. That's, and if you already are, let's say, an established person in a university, you ask any of the wrong questions, or in fact, any questions at all, and the sponsorship dries up, the grants dry up. So this idea that there is a consensus is a lie. If you don't toe the line, if you don't express the orthodox opinions, if you don't go along with the crowd on this one, you will be crucified. And this is particularly true the more qualified you are. you will be absolutely crucified, and you will be bullied and intimidated and harassed and slandered. You know, I meet people all the time and they tell me their opinion of this or that. And then they also tell me, well, they wouldn't say this to anyone else because they're afraid of expressing any opinion about anything. And it is the same in academic institutes and in universities. You know, Jordan Peterson and people like Jordan Peterson, all of these people will tell you the same thing. They get emails from their colleagues and people, highly educated people in universities all the time. They get emails from these people all the time saying, I agree with you, but I can't say it. And on this transgender thing, there are loads of people in universities that really don't believe in this at all, but they're going along with it because they have to. They literally have to, because if they say the wrong word, they're finished. So, and I'm waffling, and as I always do, but this is an important point, because this argument of consensus, as I say, this is the fail-safe argument. This is the argument where, okay, maybe you're getting confused by the science and you're not sure what to think, but don't worry, there's a consensus. All those scientists out there, all those people who make the world, this highly complicated world, work, and almost miraculously, all of those people are agreed. The consensus. And that's a great argument. Unless, of course, you understand that, if you open your mouth, if you question anything, be it climate change, transgenderism, anti-racism, mass immigration, you ask any questions about any of these things, and you will be destroyed. And you will be bullied, really bullied, viciously bullied. So this consensus is a lie. So the point I'm making is that I'm not qualified to talk about the science. Although, as I think I said, I'm probably better qualified than a lot of people. But I wouldn't claim to be an expert on the science. But I do understand the politics of this. And the politics of this are rotten, and always have been. And just about everything the climate change people say is a lie. Almost everything. So I don't believe any of this climate stuff at all. Now, I don't know if climate change is happening, no question about that. And it might well be being caused by people. That's quite possible. But there's no proof of that. None. Zero. And if you look at the people who are arguing this case, that it is man-made, all of these people are absolutely corrupt. Totally corrupt. So there you are. But it's actually scary to watch this hysteria. There's no other word for it. It's like a mass hysteria. You know, you had George Floyd, you have mass immigration, then you had the transgender thing, now you have this. You know, you could say with some truth that people broadly, the range of people, the people you meet in the streets, you could say that people are going mad. You know, it's beginning to take on the characteristic of a mass paranoid madness that's taking over our societies. But there you are.